Hi, I'm Justin Kennedy. I want to thank my brother and colleague Balz, as well as medienwerk, for offering me this platform to speak. I think that is a glorious offering, especially now for a lot of our white allies and artists who are asking, like, what can I do? There's so many things you can do. I mean, you can put your money where your thumbs are. You can try to encourage people and government institutions to defund the police. You can give money to bail out funds for protesters. You can give money to memorial funds for some of these Black lives that have been lost due to police brutality. You can also give your platform over to a voice that's relevant now. And that's, for example, what Balz has done, and I'm grateful for it. I decided not to go for the tearjerker because I know I can look at a picture or a clip or a headline even, and I can start to cry and I can tap into that emotion. Seeing your bodies murdered, going viral, especially at this moment now where people are forced to be inside, forced to be in isolation, forced to be introspective, and thus consuming more of this viral content. It can be really re-traumatizing to see these videos over and over, and they haunt you, and they re-traumatize us Black people. But on one hand, this moment with the backdrop of a neo-fascist government arising not just in the US but all over, and in addition to quarantine, this particular video, the massacre of George Floyd on May 25th, created an uprising, a certain spark that I had never seen, a global impact that I had never seen Black Lives Matter have. And I'm hoping that we can use this momentum and incite actual change, although I'm not sure that the US can ever completely reform from its white supremacist regime as its fabric is built around it. However, I remain an Afro-pessimist and an optimist. So instead of going for this fear jerker or tear jerker or heart vomiter, rather I'll speak from a heart that breaks repeatedly. It breaks over and over about this matter, or from a record that keeps skipping or looping incessantly like a Sisyphusian loop station, or a form of outdated scripting that's plagued and conned us for eons. I'm one of the lucky ones. I got away. I've been living in Germany for the last 12 years, and my physical safety has never, ever been compromised. I walk the streets, I trape around in all kinds of outfits with all kinds of affects, and I've never once felt unsafe. And I do not take this for granted, as I know many of my people globally have experienced strong experiences of anti-Blackness and violence. But why should I have to fear for my physical safety? If my psyche wasn't splashed with this notion that I deserve less human rights because I'm Black, then I wouldn't have to be concerned with that in the first place. But it's already something that I'm concerned with and think about constantly. I'm the lucky one. I'm the one who got away, but you can't escape it, and neither can I, says the globalized TikTok. I can't stop placing blame on the backdrop of dump trucks and viral culture. And this time of isolationship, I never remember a time when it mattered and didn't matter the matter as it enters a black hole. I never remembered a time when Black lives mattered so hard on a global scale. I guess being in a space of forced introspection, people are consuming a lot more viral content. So it only makes sense that the massacre of George Floyd sparked an uprising and ignited people to hit the streets, ignited people to get peaceful, ignited people to put their money where their thumbs are. It ignited people, white people, to stop glorifying Black suffering. It ignited people, white people, to explore their fragilities and perhaps to fall back into a pile of books or a bibliography instead of asking their POC friends to help them unpack systematic racism. I want to talk about techno because I live in Berlin and techno is a big part of the culture there. It's a big, big part of the culture. And it's interesting how none of the techno producers have spoken out. A lot of white artists have kept their mouths shut. A lot of white curators have kept their mouths shut. And I realize it's a sensitive thing. And in call-out cancel culture, it's so easy for you to say the wrong thing and get canceled. So the fear of speaking is strong, and I get it. But silence is death. And I think it's really important that that you as an ally know when to fall back and offer space and know when to speak up. And now it's a moment of speaking up. We have to hold each other accountable. We have to incite radical empathy, which is not just the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes or to say, I feel you, I understand, I get that. But it's actually to deeply recognize and accept your part in the pain of someone else. Like how your privilege, your joy, your well-being ultimately is tied to someone else's subordination, to their pain, to their oppression. That's what radical empathy is. And I'm hoping that this moment now incites that. I, for example, can't stop placing blame on the failed social experiment started by Europeans, by the way, because I think it's so easy for people to relegate the world's issues with race and anti-Blackness onto the States. And yes, the fabric of that nation is built upon indigenous genocide, on chattel slavery, on the dehumanizing of Black bodies while hyper consuming their cultures. So I totally get it. It's very like each nation, each culture needs a certain context. But anti-Blackness is global, and it's really, really becoming a raw truth in people's minds and hearts that perhaps formerly denied this. I can't stop placing the blame on this failed social experiment started by Europeans, because European is exactly how they still treat immigrants now here. I can't stop placing the blame on indigenous genocide, settler colonialism, chattel slavery, the consistent dehumanizing of Black bodies while hyper-consuming their cultures, also the neo-fascist governments that are arising around the world, or the neoliberal agenda of tokenism where Black faces in high places just won't cut it. Or this market-driven economy, or this turbo-capitalist economy, or this white hetero-patriarch or this hyper-consumption of cultures, both visual and in real life, or this militarized police state. I mean, I think it's really, really important that we zoom out. Racism is a symptom of a larger issue. We have to be able to zoom out. I realize that we still have to heal and reconcile, which puts us in our feelings and puts us in this place of anger, resistance, rebellion. And those can all be really constructive, and we're going to channel them, and we are channeling them for actual change and justice, which is beautiful. But I think it's important, when given the time and space, we zoom out and see that there's some larger issues at play here where racism is just a symptom, or police brutality is just a symptom of a larger issue. As I said before, I'm quite an Afro-pessimist, but I'm also an idealist. And I try to look for the silver lining behind the silver bullets in this situation. And there's certain people who really step up to the plate and that give me hope and that put a smile behind the tears. Such as people sharing tips on how to protest, or the store owners in LA whose stores were trashed, who still stand in solidarity and request justice for Black lives, or the New York City bus driver who refused to drive the arrested protesters. But we have to also be very cautious about the media. I mean, I was also seeing these silver lining behind the silver bullet stories about cops in Coral Gables kneeling in solidarity with the protesters, which I think is an oxymoron. I mean, it's hard to say that you're a cop and in solidarity with the justice. It just doesn't exist. I mean, just like in the time of Corona, there was a lot of information being passed around via the internet. And there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of dubious information and a lot of fake news. So I think it's really important that if you have sources or people that you trust their advice, you trust their directions, then go for that. I was following this healer, and her name is Rachel Cargill, and she offers a beautiful overview of the situation now, but also tools in how to request and demand revolution. And some of these tools are demanding that we insist for people over product, people over profit, people over property. And she also has some ways that people can be proactive, especially white people, allies, in a more solutions-oriented healing. The first thing she cites is critical knowledge. So basically, if you don't know, you can ask somebody. I think white people are now finally getting it, that asking their POC friends to help them unpack this stuff can be a re-trauma and a violence in itself. So they're looking toward each other. There's a lot of anti-racist white people doing the work. If you need help, reach out to those people. Also, there is tons of resources, articles, books. Fall back into a pile of books or a helpful, useful, resourceful bibliography. Gather, acquire the critical knowledge that you need to incite revolution, both personally and globally. The second thing, as I mentioned earlier, is this radical empathy. So it's this idea that radical empathy is not just putting yourself in someone else's shoes. So I imagine what it would be like to be in someone else's shoes. But it's also about recognizing deeply and accepting deeply your position in someone else's suffering. So recognizing your privilege and recognizing the fact that your privilege ultimately is tied to someone else's pain. That's radical empathy. The last thing she cites is this intentional action. So finding ways to be intentional with your actions. I think putting your money where your thumbs and mouth are is a good way. You can put your money into memorial funds for some of these Black lives that have been lost. You can put your money into bailout funds for protesters fighting for justice every day on the streets. You can defund the police. I just saw that MoMA, which is a huge arts institution in New York City, just pulled their relation and their funding with the NYPD, which is huge. You can support Black-owned businesses. There's a lot of ways, both grand and small. How do you translate Flüchtigkeit back into English? Thank you.